Konnichiwa.
Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast.
Kia ora, Catherine.
Konnichiwa, Jane.
We have an exciting episode today, don't we, with our guest, Graham Sayer.
We do, indeed. I mean, Graham, what a guru. Not only exporting timber from Japan to New Zealand. Yes, it can be done. Let's just say we got the most amazing download on the Art of Kendo. Graham's been in that sport for, more than 33 years, because that's how long he was president of the New Zealand Kendo Federation.
Yeah.
But I just still think, Jane, there's not many people, including myself, who really know a lot about Kendo. And I think you've had great experience with it. So can you tell us a little bit more about what your explanation of Kendo would be to the listeners?
Well, I'll just have to say I've never actually done it, but I have been around it a lot. And one of my best friends here in Japan was doing Kendo while she was here. And also my husband did Kendo as a junior high school student. So I have heard a lot about Kendo. So this is all reported, and I have, seen it as well, teaching in junior high school. But it's not an Olympic sport as Judo is. And so it doesn't always get a lot of attention. It's one of those sports that requires a lot of equipment. People wear their full-on helmet sort of thing, and they have like a chest covering thing. Yeah, protector, and a special hakama they wear, the sort of trousers, if you will, and also the swords that are made from bamboo that they use, and special gloves and all these things that you need to be able to do the sport, as opposed to judo or karate where you just rock up with your dogi on and you just get into it. But one thing that is happening with Kendo in particular is they're really struggling with the numbers of people in Japan who are taking up Kendo. Just like everything, with the population decreasing, the number of people who are actually starting Kendo is really decreasing. And I've seen it even in my neighborhood with our local junior high school, which has always had a Kendo club in the school. And it's been very successful. They've gone to national championships. It now doesn't even exist. So that tells me that there are just far fewer people who are even starting Kendo, let alone, continuing through to get to the kind of level that our guest Graham is today. So it's a tricky sport in that way, I think. Like, entry barriers might be quite high with all of the gear and things, but
there are benefits. No, I mean, even though you've got all this gear you've got to amass, and sometimes it's probably a good metaphor for a lot of things that we do in life, the harder things are the things that are actually really beneficial for us, right? For Graham, he started out with judo and through an injury converted over to Kendo, and I think it made his life. The philosophy obviously translates into all facets of everything that he does. And we're just so proud to have him as one of our star New Zealanders, because he was awarded the Order of the Rising Sun from Japan in 2022, a medal for his services to the cultural ties between New Zealand and Japan through Kendo. And he's a very humble spirit, but boy, oh boy, do we get a download on the amazing insights into what Kendo has brought to him in his life. And we really want you to keep listening, because if you don't, you're going to miss out on quite a lot of very, very good stuff to hear.
Yes. Here we go. Let's hear it from Graham. Kia ora, Graham. Welcome to the Jandals in Japan podcast. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
So we like to start with a warm-up question, and our warm-up question for you is, we know you are a master of Kendo. I had a wee look and it said you were, is it 7th Dan?
I'm a Kyoshi 7th Dan.
7th Dan, there you go. So are there any other Japanese martial arts or traditional arts you'd like to try that you haven't tried yet, and why?
That's actually quite a good question. I have a background in judo when I was in my teens. And I've often thought that if for some reason I couldn't do Kendo, and that is a possibility because it's a full contact thing, I would probably do Judo, which is archery, traditional Japanese archery. And I think probably one of the main reasons for that is that the etiquette, and the philosophy is very close to what we follow in Kendo. And I actually have quite a good friend here in Shizuoka, a Swedish guy, who is a Kyudo-ka. And so occasionally I go along and watch him in action. So yeah,
Ooh,
that's
maybe
what
you
I would
have
do.
to ask him to let you have a go in the near future sometime.
Get a
Let us know how you
practice.
get on.
Maybe.
Yeah. Catherine, which
Oh,
martial art or traditional art would you like to have a go at
I
and
really wish
why?
I was good at judo. You know, I remember back when I studied Japanese. Dennis Logan, you probably know Graham. He taught
Oh,
us a
definitely.
few
Yes.
throws, and I remember going home and throwing my three brothers. It was awesome. But you talked about traditional arts too, though, Jane. And I've done ikebana before or hara ryu,
Mm.
and I did a little bit of shodo. But shodo's coming up for me to do calligraphy again and just have a quiet space where I perfect a bit of my kanji, which is atrocious now when I write it. So that might be the one for me. A little
Ah, very
softer,
good.
but also requires quite a lot of concentration. So
Oh,
it could be quite good for my
absolutely.
brain. How
Yes,
about
and
you?
you can continue that into your 80s, like my mother-in-law, who is
Right?
a master in calligraphy.
Yeah.
She's amazing what she can do. She makes it look so easy when you know, if you try and you create this mess, and then you're like, oh, okay, it's not that easy. Very good.
And
Me, I
yeah.
have done, like you said, like you have done ikebana, I've done some karate, and I have sort of thought I would love to give Aikido a go. From the outside looking in, it looks like it's not kicking and punching, right? It's sort of controlling other people's movements as such, I guess, if you
Yeah,
want to
it's
say.
going with the flow. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also like the whole like the wrist holds and something like that you could, if you needed to, defend yourself as well. So, yeah, I think that would be something I'd like to give a go. And I actually see that they have classes here in my city, and they are welcoming new members, even international people like myself. But they always hold them really late at night. I'm like, I'm not going out of my house after 7 o'clock if I don't have to. So, yeah, I have not joined that for that very shallow reason. Anyway, well, let's all check in with each other later and see if we actually give these things a go.
Sounds great.
Good idea.
Well, Graham Sayer, finally we got you onto the show. We're so glad to have you. We know that your motto is Kiwi Spirit with global horizons. You're a martial arts athlete, if no one has already guessed from the introduction there, doing judo, as you said, and now kendo. And your career blends a whole lot of entrepreneurship as well as cultural exchange. After a series of business ventures, we heard that you are now focused on timber exports from Japan to New Zealand and also supporting your wife's business, which is around kendo. So we can't wait to hear about that. We're also super pleased to have you, and a deep congratulations to you for your life's work leading you to being awarded Japan's Order of the Rising Sun in 2022 for services to cultural ties between Japan and New Zealand. We're super proud to have you here. Thank you very much for coming on to Jandals in Japan.
Wow, with that
That's
introduction, where do you
a very
start,
nice
Graham?
Where
introduction.
do I start? Well, I'm going to go
Catherine, thank
back.
you.
I'm going to go back, Graham, to your roots because I heard you grew up in Taranaki. Is that right?
Yeah, certainly did. I'm from the
What on?
Naki.
Well, from the Naki. Yes, exactly.
Mm.
Where on earth did Naki become Japan? What sparked your interest? Is it actually martial arts or something else?
It's judo, basically. Back in my very early teens, I was fortunate enough to have an uncle who did judo. He had a book called Vital Judo, which is a very well-known book. He gave me a loan of it, and I got rather excited about the whole thing. And next minute, I was talking my father into taking me down to the local judo club. And in those days, probably still now, the judo scene was very vibrant in New Plymouth. I think, as you said a moment ago, going to judo and then coming home and beating your siblings up was probably a bit of a driver for me. I had a younger brother.
So good.
I still have a younger brother, but being able to do a bit of judo and go back and rough him up was a bit of a driver right in the beginning.
Well, you
But there
think
you go.
judo's in the arms, but it's all in the hip. That's what I
It
learned.
is.
And if you've got a
Well,
good hip, you can just flip anybody. And I loved it. So you've got me sparking on that again. But I think it was 20 years of age you came to Japan to
yes.
do some judo here. Tell us about that trip here.
It was a major trip for myself and a very close friend who came with me, also a judoka. He actually ended up representing New Zealand 3 times at the Olympics. Impressions, I just couldn't believe how how interesting Japan was, from a young 20-year-old thinking about, what I want to do with my life, and suddenly being thrown into Japan, which was booming. Because this is the end of the 70s, and economically, Japan was really sparking, and we had a lot of very interesting opportunities laid out. And underlying this was the opportunity to improve my judo.
So interesting,
Yeah, I
right?
can't even imagine what it must have been like here in
I
the
know.
70s. There was, nothing that we have like today, and booming Japan, right? I've only ever experienced sort of shriveled post-bubble Japan. Maybe you too, Catherine, right?
Pretty much,
Do you
yeah.
have like a wild story from the bubble era you can share with us?
We were just consumed with having to survive because we didn't have a lot of money when we first came over. So we did what most people did, and that's teach English. I had students, or so-called students, that were very successful in certain areas of their lives. But not only that, they were incredibly wealthy. So English conversation lessons tended to be more focused on having a good time than actually studying. So I had a lot of very expensive evenings on my so-called students.
Yeah, have you got a memory of that time that really stands out as completely, I'm out of the Naki right now. I'm in this place called Japan. Is there something like that that
Sure.
struck you? Can still think right now?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, I've got one particular experience that I had was that the people that we had sort of around us supporting us at the time. Now, I say us because I was there with a group of 3 or 4 other Kiwis, and we were all doing judo. And in those days, it was, I suppose, from a Japanese point of view, it was a little bit of a novelty to have foreign friends. One particular gentleman was a very prominent politician and also an ex-judoka. Yeah. And I remember that the local election came along and we didn't think too much about it, apart from the fact that it was very noisy with people campaigning everywhere and all the rest of it. But we got invited along to a party. There were 3 or 4 of us. And we went along, and in those days, my Japanese was pretty limited. And I suddenly got thrown up on the stage and announced as a person that was leading a group of foreigners who was supporting this particular politician. And the worst thing is that there were a hell of a lot of people there, but the media was there as well. And I can actually remember being pushed up on the stage, expected to speak in Japanese, and my legs actually shaking. I'd never experienced that before. We got through it. So I was being exposed to things like that were rather interesting, to say the least.
Did he get in?
Yes, he
Nominate?
did.
Well, there you
Yes,
go.
yes, he did, and we
Early power days
continued.
of Kiwis in Japan.
Exactly. Yeah.
You talked about knees because that leads me straight into what happened after that because judo's a pretty tough martial arts, isn't it? On your knees and on your lower body as well. And I guess you told me that you had a knee injury and that led you then into kendo. So how did that change things for you then? Because they're completely different martial arts. How did it change your life and your career trajectory from there?
Yeah, it was a pretty defining moment, actually. I dislocated my knee, which started things off, and myself and 2 or 3 other Kiwis were practicing at Dorsetshire University, pretty strong university at the time. I wasn't particularly that good at judo, to be honest, but I've stuck to it. But basically, I was getting injured on a regular basis, and this one time the knee dislocated. I ended up in hospital, and I ended up having an operation again with language issues and stuff. I can remember the because in those days you didn't go under full anesthetic; it was only sort of a half anesthetic, and can remember the doctor talking about how he had to rush away to catch a bus to go on a skiing trip, and we just wanted to make this really quick. I could understand that much.
No.
But anyway, the operation
Japan.
didn't go so well.
You had this operation
Uh,
in Japan.
Yes, yes,
Oh,
yes. And I can remember the hospital. I drive past it when I'm in Kyoto quite often. But anyway, what should have been a simple operation turned into a mess. And I ended up having to recoup around about 6 months. And during that time, my judo teacher gave me a shinai, which is a Japanese bamboo foil that we use in kendo. I didn't have a clue what it was, but suggested that I wave that around to loosen up my shoulders, because in those days we used to do a lot of weight training and things. Took it home, waved it around a little bit, and my then girlfriend, she happened to have done kendo at a serious level at high school, which I knew nothing about. And so she started telling me about kendo, and then it kind of went from there. Changing martial arts in my situation was not an easy thing to do, because in those days we were set up with a visa called a 416-3, which was a visa to study culture. And judo was part of culture, and so was kendo and learning Japanese and things. So whenever I went along to the immigration to extend my visa, it was pretty easy with judo, because all you needed to show them was that you were doing judo and you passed your first dan, or you were doing judo the next year, you passed your second dan. So my whole life was tied up around that, including my visa. And so to change suddenly from judo to kendo was not an easy thing. And as far as my relationships with my judo teachers were concerned, and some of my mates, that was a little bit tough. So it took me a couple of years to transfer over. At one stage, I was doing both judo and kendo, but it worked out for the better, because kendo suits me so much better as far as my physical size and, I guess, attitude in some ways. And the friends that I mentioned before went on and had very successful judo careers. And I think I made the change at the right time, because, as you know, kendo's a major part of my life. So.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. And sometimes it is that, isn't it? One of the things that it looks like it's something tragic turns out to be your lifelong beautiful ray of sunshine, right? The
Yes.
silver cloud. What is it? The cloud with the silver lining? That one.
Something like
Sorry,
that.
my
Yeah.
metaphors are
Yeah.
mixed up.
We want to hear what it was like for you, like switching between kendo and getting into this new thing, and how you shouldn't do these things lightly in Japan, potentially.
Yeah. You got to really think about it.
Yeah, I think probably, as I mentioned before, because in order to have that type of visa in those days, we had to have a sponsor. It wasn't a particular person that paid money or anything, but they had to be there as a backstop. So if we did something illegal, they would take responsibility for us. So going to my then sponsor, who happened to be my judo teacher as well, and explaining that I was going to stop being part of his gang and I was going over to this other gang, which did kendo, was not an easy thing to do, as the Japanese are really into their say type of old boys and old girls, and meeting up with people that are in their clubs and staying as lifetime friends. And I didn't really appreciate that when I started the process of changing from judo to kendo, but near the end of it, I really did. And it was just a sensitive time, and I just had to be very careful about it.
Well, it
Yeah.
sounds like you made it in the end, but it's not comfortable to go through these transitions,
No,
particularly in Japan,
no, it
that's for
isn't. No.
sure. And I was interested, you also mentioned that kendo suited you more, sort of your personality potentially, or the way that you wanted to do your martial art. What is it about kendo that made it suit you so well?
To give your listeners a little bit of a very quick overview, kendo is practiced by around about 2 million people here in Japan. It's one of the most popular martial arts, and it's the type of martial art that you can do from a small child right up until you die, actively and in full contact. Outside of Japan, there's approximately 1.5 million people that practice kendo. And the New Zealand Kendo Federation has been in existence since the early 70s. We're now around about 500 members nationwide, and that's spread across about 10 or 11 dojo right across the country. Is it a popular martial art? No, no. If you compare it with anything that has anything to do with the Olympics, such as judo, karate for a certain period of time, it's very hard to compete with that popularity, if you like. But the interesting thing is that kendo over the years has created people who, once they get into it, they just keep going. I think one of the key things, well, what definitely was for me, was that you can walk into a judo dojo anywhere in Japan, and you'll see young people, relatively young people, training hard, and you'll see the old boys or the old girls doing what they can do, which is basically stand on the side and give instruction and do a little bit of coaching, mainly because it's so hard on your body, so hard on your body, no matter how supple and fit you are. Where if you go into a kendo dojo, the people out the front, inevitably, because of the grading system, if they're sixth, seventh, eighth dan, you can just about guarantee they're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and even 90s. And they're not standing around, they're actually actively taking part, where younger people will be lining up to practice with them. And so your window of being able to give back or contribute back into kendo society is just so long compared with a lot of other martial arts. So did it suit me better? Yeah, I'm not particularly a big guy, and I'm definitely not majorly physically strong. Two things that can be of huge advantage on the judo mat. But I found that kendo, and part of that is the fact that kendo is actually quite subtle. You don't grab somebody, you don't need to wrestle with anybody or have any bodily contact in the beginning. It's just a matter of two swords crossing and two minds trying to work out what you're doing with each other. And so from that point of view, physical, being big or small or old or young doesn't make a lot of difference. That suited me much better.
You did mention old girls there. So there is a space for women in the sport of kendo.
Oh, absolutely. I'll give you an example. The Auckland Kendo Club is my home dojo, around about 100 members. We're the largest dojo in the country. I retired from being the president of that dojo a couple of years ago, even though I'm still actively involved in it. Our co-president is female. She's a fifth dan. Actually, the vice president is also female, and she's a fifth dan. One of the ladies is 30 years old. The other one's in her 50s. And they're both inspiring role models, not just for women, other women in the dojo, but for everybody. And so the lady in her 50s, she has a teenage son who is a second dan. And so it becomes a whole family thing. So, like with a lot of arts and pursuits and sports and things, when women get to a certain age, then obviously they have family commitments, especially in this country, that lead them to looking after their children, perhaps a little bit more than their husbands. But in kendo, we've got a very sort of a family unit, and a lot of women continue doing kendo through the whole child rearing age and things. So from that point of view, it's a wonderful thing. And yes, a lot of females are doing it.
That's
A lot.
awesome. Yeah, don't have to just stand on the sidelines. You can do your own practice while the kids are also doing their kendo. That's very
Well, you
good.
can practice with them.
Yes, right. You
That's the
get,
key thing.
yeah, yeah,
Grandfathers practicing with granddaughters are a regular thing. So
that's
So
wonderful.
brilliant.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know how all of this knowledge of kendo has helped you outside of the kendo world in Japan as well, perhaps in business or other things that you've done, and how does it cross over?
what I will say is that Kendo has a very strong network that goes with it. And this is not just a Japanese thing. I've been lucky enough over the years to travel around to many countries doing Kendo, and this is true wherever I go. But for example, in my particular case, with my business, I've had three main business mentors. Two of the have been Kendo people. And in one particular case, which started me off in my first main big business, I guess, the gentleman involved was the president of a very large company, and it was his influence got me thinking seriously about having a career out of the corporate world, but in my own business. So the networking value of something like Kendo has been huge and continues to be huge.
Yeah, because I loved what you said before about two swords crossing
Yep.
and two minds working it out, because that's the key, isn't it, in business, is getting to the place where you both agree in your transactions. But you're using a philosophy here, you're borrowing from Kendo, it sounds like to
Yes.
me, to work through with your mentors helping you there into the world of business. What
Yes.
sorts of things have your mentors encouraged you that has really helped you in your business transactions?
Well, to give you the example of the gentleman that I was just talking about, I ended up in a joint venture with him and his company, and we went on to create a small chain of stores in Auckland, and the joint venture lasted 15 odd years. But a lot of our business meetings would end up with us talking about Kendo, but he would use Kendo to explain the ideas, the visions that he had for what he wanted us to do business wise. And this might be as simple as being determined to do it this way or do it that way. And you need to practice this, for example, prior to a meeting, prepare exactly what you do before a competition in Kendo or before a grading in Kendo. You not only prepare yourself physically, but you prepare yourself mentally. So I found that, for example, observation, it's really important because we constantly have eye contact in Kendo. A lot of martial arts, you're looking up, you're looking down, and in Kendo, your eye contact is locked. It's very much the same with business. And you learn to be very sensitive of a person's, in the case of business, body language, in the case of Kendo body movement, perhaps, but any change of feeling about the person in Kendo is picked up because we ki to each other. We shout at each other. It looks a little bit ridiculous, I guess, for people that don't understand what a ki is. It's a way of communicating your emotional state in business, in discussions with people, just the tone of their voice, just the way that they're coming across. These are all things that some people are lucky enough to have a natural ability to pick these up. I wasn't, but I really feel that my Kendo has assisted me. And these were the types of lessons that I was getting on a regular basis from my Kendo teacher, who happened to be my business mentor.
Yeah,
Just
I
wanted
love
to,
that. So you said that there's something that is important is noticing the change of feeling towards the other person in
yes.
yourself, or both.
It's both really, Jane. We quite often say in Kendo, when we cross swords with each other, we're having a conversation. You know, we're having a conversation now. Unfortunately, it's not live, so it makes it a little bit difficult with the fact that, you know, it's through technology, but it's still wonderful because I can see your expression and stuff. But if I'm in the same room as you and we're doing Kendo together, then a lot of other things will suddenly appear. For example, I'll know straight away if you're nervous. I'll know straight away if you're an impatient sort of person. I'll know straight away if we're doing Kendo and you get a little bit upset or a little bit angry with me, for example, right? You
I
know,
love this is
This
this
is
is
great.
fascinating. Yeah.
Keep
oh,
going.
and I actually don't think, quite honestly, I don't think that this is just with Kendo alone. However, Kendo can be a lot clearer than other martial arts like karate and even like Aikido because there is such a huge physical element to those three arts, where in Kendo, the physical element is there, but it only happens at the defined moment that you both attack each other or a physical attack happens. What happens prior to the physical attack is a lot of psychological play, a lot of sorting out where you are and where they are. And this is one of the reasons that Kendo, the older you get, the better your Kendo gets. I'm 67 and I'm doing the best Kendo I've ever done in my life now at 67. And during my 20s and 30s, I think I went to 5 world championships. So I've done the competition thing. I've done the, if you like, the sporting side of it. And that's thrilling. and it's wonderful. And yes, you have to train hard, and yes, you have to be fast and speedy and correct. But as your physical abilities decline, your mental abilities have to grow and your experience has to grow. And the wonderful thing about Kendo is that you can use this experience to not only overcome your opponent, but instruct your opponent or teach your opponent. So again, rather strange because it probably doesn't happen in other martial arts. But as a matter of fact, I had a practice yesterday and my opponent would have been 81 or 82. After the practice, or actually during it, I thanked him twice because the point, if you like, that he struck on me showed me very clearly where I was lacking, where I dropped my concentration, where I had an opening, of which I can then take away and learn. So yeah, it's
Amazing.
kind of the neat thing about Kendo in my mind, anyway.
Yeah. And you got it handed to you by an 81-year-old, did you say?
Yeah, anyone.
Yeah, wow.
So beautiful what you've explained. And I saw you go into your vibe right then. You are just in your element as you spoke. And if I talk about recognizing through Kendo your movements, your feeling, you were not nervous just now or impatient or upset. You were the whole opposite of that as you spoke. And obviously it's true to your spirit that you are, even through us over here, over on online. We've met in person, so we know each other very well. But now I'm thinking, what were you thinking when we were having sushi together?
I was
But
thinking that too. Was
was I nervous? Was I
yeah.
impatient? Was I upset? I don't think so. But we're crossing swords here. But I just, I can understand more now, Graham, how you were awarded this Order of the Rising Sun because you're completely devoted. And I know you're going to be humble about this, but we are so proud of you as Kiwis. But how about that? Tell us how it happened. I know that the investiture
That happened.
happened in New Zealand. So tell
Yes.
us about that and don't downgrade it. Bring it up to the level it was when you were there and how you felt and what it means to you.
Okay. Yeah. That's a tough one, Catherine, because I was a little naive in the beginning. I had a phone call from the Consul General. I was in Auckland at the time. As a matter of fact, we were locked down during the COVID, and I had a phone call from a Consul General saying, "Look, we're considering you for this award." And he said, "If your background check, because they have to do a police check on this thing, if it works out, will you accept it?" And I can remember actually where I was. I was walking down the beach in St. Heliers in Auckland, and I just said, "Yeah, I guess so. No problem at all." Went home, Googled what the Consul General was talking about, and I thought, "Oh, wow, that's interesting." And I never thought too much more about it until later on when I got another phone call to say that you've checked out and you're going to be awarded the Order of the Rising Sun on the 3rd of November in 2021. Suddenly I'm getting these messages and phone calls from Japan. And these are relatives, mainly of my wife and friends, congratulating me because it had been published in the national newspaper as the list of honors and things. And I'm thinking, whoa, I really need to understand what this is. So I did a little bit more checking and I went and saw the Consul General and sat down with him. And he explained to me at the time that the actual ceremony itself can't take place because of the lockdown. So I thought, why can't it take place? We're here in New Zealand, and at that time we were relatively free, okay, compared with the rest of the world. But he said, no, the main reason is that the actual award itself gets made in Japan, and then they put somebody on a plane to bring it over to Canberra because Canberra apparently is the closest place to handle these sort of things for the whole of the Oceania area. And then it needs to be picked up by somebody from Auckland and then brought at the end of the day, it was a year and a half or so before we could actually have the ceremony when the thing arrived. After finding out the significance of it in Japan, I kind of felt in a way that, firstly, I didn't deserve it by myself. It should have been with a group of people that had been with me for many years as we built the federation. And probably I think my wife deserved most of it, to be honest, for putting up with me. But yep, we went through and we had the ceremony, and it was all very nice. And the honor itself has some side benefits, definitely here in Japan, with business, especially. Even, I mean, I don't have it written on a business card, or I don't wear anything that signifies it. But when I do get introductions, it's one of the things that gets brought up all the time. So from that point of view, I guess I'm very lucky and humbled at the whole thing.
So tell us a little bit about what you're up to now.
Well, I'm still doing quite a lot of kendo, but as far
Clearly.
Japan, as many of the listeners will know, is a civilization that's been built on timber. As a matter of fact, I read somewhere the other day that bricks and stone masonry and stuff wasn't introduced into Japan until like 1860 or something by some Germans. So we've had literally hundreds of years of wood culture in this country. And up until very short time ago, Japanese timber was only being exported in log form to somewhere like China or Vietnam or Indonesia, and then changed into furniture or whatever and sold back to Japan, or it was being sent from Japan to somewhere like the States as low grade fencing material. So what we started to do was focus on the top end, and we focused on high-end hinoki, which is a Japanese cypress, and high-end sugi, which is Japanese cedar. And I have a couple of customers in New Zealand who are both prominent sawmillers. They have continued to buy rough sawn timber off me, and they do stuff in New Zealand like char it into yakisugi, which is charred Japanese timber. So it's the black stuff. It's a bit popular at the moment with architects and end users. And they also use it as an alternative for something like Western red cedar, which has been coming into New Zealand in huge volumes from Canada for the last 40 years. So what we are doing is exporting to New Zealand, Australia, and Italy, but we're doing it in a way where we have to educate first, and we have to explain about what the qualities are of the timber before we can sell it. So it's quite a slow process, and it's not a huge business, but it's so exciting. And timber's such a neat thing to deal with. It's sustainable, it can be recycled, it helps the planet in the long run. And the wonderful thing about the Japanese timber industry is not only do they have this really rich history, timber auctions and all that sort of stuff from hundreds of years ago, they're also leading the world in things like fire resistant timber, earthquake, seismic use of timber in skyscrapers, for goodness sake. In Tokyo, there are buildings that are 13 and 14 stories high that have been built entirely of timber, with a little bit of steel and concrete mixed in the foundation, but fundamentally they're in timber. So it's an exciting area. So that's the main reason we're in this business.
You got very excited there telling us about that. So,
Oh, it's a
yeah.
really cool thing to
It
deal
is,
with.
isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Yeah, with that yucky style
Yeah, it's very
chart.
popular, isn't
It's
it?
very popular in New Zealand. I think even my youngest brothers put it on their house because they loved it, the aesthetic of it, but also the purpose of it, that it's already charred and therefore more fire resistant, which makes a lot of
Yep.
sense, right? And I think obviously you're in Japan in Shizuoka, but you'll probably take yourself off to Osaka for the expo, no doubt, to see that large wooden timber structure, which is the circle, which is the largest, I think, wooden structure in the world, got the Guinness Book World of Records, apparently,
Which
right?
is from
Yes.
So,
Well,
Fukushima.
Fukushima,
Hooray!
yay! So I believe people are going up to it and smelling the hinoki, the cypress that it's been built out of, which is amazing. Goodness
yes.
me. It felt like a Coles to Newcastle old expression there of taking timber where New Zealand grows trees into timber. And here we are bringing it from Japan. But it's different material, isn't it? We don't have it.
Oh,
And
very much so.
yeah, and it's used for a different purpose. It's very exciting.
Well, not only that, Catherine, as I was saying before, people are becoming so much more aware of their environment these days. And I'm not putting radiata pine down at all. However, if you want to use radiata pine on the outside of your house, for example, and radiata pine, as we know, is a big timber out of New Zealand, then you have to use some pretty horrible chemicals so that it can survive. Where sugi and hinoki, or the Japanese timbers, do not need these chemicals. So, you know, your kids can happily run around the house and lick the wall. It's not going to harm them. So you'll be surprised with a sector of the market is actually in New Zealand. They don't only talk the talk with the green side, they're actually prepared to pay a little bit extra for the people that can. So, where I find here in Japan, people are always talking about being green and that being sustainable and all the rest of it, but not a lot of people are prepared to pay the extra that's necessary, say for your organic vegetables or whatever it may be. But in New Zealand and in Australia, they are. So we aim for that sector of the market, and it is the top end residential sector that we're after. That's where our timber goes. Just you mentioned the expo. We have a group of 16 people from the Australian Timber Development Association arriving in 3 weeks. Again, tied up with my wife's business, but having the overflow to my timber. And I'm taking these. Most of them are business owners in the timber industry, from sawmillers right up to people that own wood processing companies and whatnot. And we're starting in Tokyo and we're going all the way through with particular focus in the Nara area for a few days, because that's where Japan's best cypress and sugi has traditionally come from, the Yoshino area. And we'll spend the last 2 days in the expo. And the reason that we're going to do that is because of what you just said.
Smell
So
the
much of the
hinoki.
expo. Yeah, smell the hinoki. Yeah.
See how
But
they've
so
made
many
it,
of the
right?
pavilions have
Yeah.
facades in timber as well. So
Exactly,
yeah,
and they're made in that traditional Japanese way, I believe, with no screws and bolts and nails. It's all with the traditional hinging, the way that it matches
that's right.
together, right?
Yes.
Dovetailing. Well, Graham, we're going to wrap up, but there must be something that we've missed that you wanted to say today, or that you'd love our listeners to take away from what you've spoken about today.
I want people to understand that Japan is not a frightening place. Japan is not a place where you have to be nervous about coming here to try and do business, to put your case across. As long as you're, as I said before, prepared to get, if you don't speak Japanese, a good interpreter, and you've got something of value, you should have Japan written on your list, the same as you would have naturally Australia and any of these places. So the message I want to put across is Japan is changing big time. The resource, whether it's in my kendo world of young people or in the business world of young people, are being listened to. In many cases in business, a lot of the older heads in business have no choice but to listen to younger people, because the technology is doing stuff that it couldn't do a few years ago. And with the introduction of stuff like AI and all the rest of it, you have some wonderful opportunities here. So by all means, give it a go. Don't just sit around preparing and reading old stories about how difficult and expensive Japan is to do business, because in many cases it's not true. You've just got to get off your backside and do it.
Oh,
There you go.
excellent. What a
You've been
great way to
told.
finish. Well, thank you so much, Graham. We've enjoyed our crossing of swords in this conversation with you today. And although it's not quite an Order of the Rising Sun, we do congratulate you on being a Jandal in Japan now, officially. And so welcome to our club. Thank you so
Thank you
much
very
for
much.
today.
Thank you. And thank you both. And I think what you're doing is pretty neat, as we discussed a year or so ago. So thank you. Thank you for getting around to allowing me to come on the program. I really appreciate it. And all the very best. Thank you.
Another fabulous episode for our Jandals, another wonderful Jandal to add to our collection of Jandals.
A collection of Jandals is getting huge, isn't it?
Mm.
Wow. Thank you so much, Graham, for sharing all of your amazing insights. I hardly know where to start, though, Jane, on how to put it all together. But I think, as I mentioned at the end with him too, that sort of two swords crossing
I like
always
that.
has a kind of negative kind of connotation of
Mm.
swords crossing. But the way he explained it, that was actually two minds working it out. Oh, that really fell deeply with me. I just
Mm.
loved that comment and how he's using this kendo to translate into business, the business world, and how we can actually anticipate by thinking of swords crossing and meeting in that middle bit, right, where they
Mm.
touch the metal, or the metal touches, that's the mind meeting,
Mhm.
and how we can convert that into our business world as well.
Mm. And it seems like Kendo has taught him a lot of life skills that he's gone on and used in his
Mm.
daily life, in his business, or just like you mentioned, observing people and how they are acting or reacting or changes in people. And things must be very useful skill to have practiced over the years.
Oh,
I'm
absolutely.
going
And
to do some more observing.
you
Yes.
and I were talking offline after about how we had dinner with him and thinking, what was he observing about us in that moment? And I'm sure that was happening, although I wasn't really. I was just enjoying the food. But there you go. Probably his mind is there at every situation, anticipating the
I guess it
needs or
becomes a
wants
natural.
or hesitations of people when he's with them. And I thought that was something to bring forward in our lives, right, in Japan, and think about a bit more.
Yeah, you don't even notice you're doing it. After a while, it becomes a natural skill that you have, right? We can all
Mm.
build this skill, like even if we don't have that skill to start with.
Yeah,
It's
observation. And I think also
observation,
when
yes.
think
Mm.
about we think about Rebecca Thorne, she also talked about observing as one of her key skills when she went into standing in the hotel and observing the people as they checked in, etc. It's kind of a really great thing that we don't even really think very well about, generally speaking. So standing there and looking at people, observing. I know you talk about this a little bit too with your groups that you're involved in through baseball, etc. Observing.
Yeah, yeah. You can see a lot going on that's not loud, but it's going on if you stop talking and look around for a bit, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I was thinking when I was listening about my own experiences in no, karate in New Zealand was a little bit different. I didn't really understand what was going on, but I also did ikebana like you, and it was the first time to see,
Hmm.
this senpai kohai, respect for elders, all this sort of grading and different levels sort of thing that goes on in these traditional sports and traditional activities like ikebana and
Mm.
calligraphy. It also translates into the world of Japan, the business world, the
Absolutely.
education world, the daily life world. So actually becoming a member of one of these things is kind of like a boot camp in
Oh,
how to figure out what's going on in Japan and why things are like this. Sure, you can read
yes.
a book on it, but if you join one of these activities, whether it's baseball, so it happens in baseball too, whether it's karate or ikebana or some kind of very Japanese
Yeah.
pastime, you too can have a boot camp in this and learn the stuff that Graham was talking about today.
Right. So get in the dojo, like literally or metaphorically in some way, and observe from a different angle, not just your business situation. You're
Mm,
saying
mm, mm. It's,
get
it's all
involved in these
translates.
activities.
Yes,
Yes, I
yes.
love it.
It's not different, I
Yeah.
don't think, right? I
No,
think,
that's true. And also, you might be very, very fortunate, like Graham was, to meet his mentors in the
mm,
dojo. His business mentors came from his kendo association. And I
mm,
think that says a lot, right? Thank you so much, Graham. It was just overwhelmingly very interesting. And at times we forgot we were actually on a podcast and had to
yeah.
remember that because we were so taken over by what you said. So thank you very much for sparing your time with us.
Another awesome episode. Keep listening. More episodes coming soon. Mata ne. Bye.